take over.
Yes, thanks. Welcome. You see us with a virtual green point, okay? As our supporter told us before, Rod is an English people, I'm a typical Austrian people, and one time a year I go to London and visit the Agile Business Conference. And for 2 years I met Rod the first time, and he offers a completely new game, and they go in his session, and it was so interesting. But okay, last year I went again to London and see the Agile Business Conference, and I know his workshop, and I don't interest me more. But in the newsletter there is an article about Rod's new invention, and that's the starting point. Komm da rein.
Geht sich das noch aus?
Aber ja.
Schau einfach.
Ja.
You can be a facilitator.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And we agreed that I translate this game into German. And it's very interesting because we have a visual translation process. Always, when I don't understand the short explanations of Rod's game, he sent me some videos and we talked about it, and he showed me some process parts, and so I'm able to translate this game. But as we agreed to deliver this here at this exhibition, Rod told me she has a newer version, and you have the new version. You have an 8-person version, the next step, And I'm poor Austrian service people. I have only 4 and the older version. But it's very interesting. Today we deliver all together. We are totally flexible. And it will be an experience. And as you see, we can work really together. And Rod is a really kind man, and we have extremely deep same behavior and same history over the different countries, and it's so interesting to interact together and to work together. So that's our agenda today. We are now in the intro, in the setup part. We have around 70 minutes or 60 minutes above the intro for one completely process. We are able to deliver 3 different processes. You can experience one process completely. And we start with one type of the cards. And it's, we will lead you completely to the process. And maybe we are ready after 70 minutes, and either we are sharing or we start again with the next process, whatever you want at this point. So now it's time. Yes. You have to present
Right here.
the speed is this too.
So, in terms of German, I comprehend maybe 10%. So be dangerous. Be careful, because you don't know which 10%. So, thank you for joining us. As Dieter has kindly said, we started in a true Agile fashion. We just interacted, we created a 4 game. So the original version of this was 4 games in English, 4 players in English. But we got quite a lot of feedback saying, can we take it higher? So hence we have the larger version. The rules are effectively the same. We have the word poker in the title. The reason is this version uses poker cards, and they are truly poker cards. Here, stretch of the imagination, they are poker card size. The reason we changed that, at several exhibitions, I had some people coming to the stand and say, I love it, but it has poker. What's the problem? A religious conflict for some people. And I thought, oh, okay, so I'm now excluding a whole group of society because I've used the word poker. So it's quite an interesting realization. I start out to create something to help us explore collaboration, and the first thing I do is block out a whole chunk of society. Not a good idea. So this is still called collaboration poker. You can get it in English and German. And this is called navigating collaboration. They are the same thing. politically acceptable and from a faith point of view acceptable. So that's the story. But really, I'm sharing it because I was really quite shocked at first, and I thought, oh, it doesn't matter. Then I reflected that it does matter. And so sometimes when we're doing our work, we're interacting with people from many different cultures. So now the question is our language potentially offensive or not? And are we paying attention to that? So that's sort of a serious point, but let's now take it up a bit. Let's make it a bit more fun. What you have, each of you have a set of cards right in front of you with colours or with the the card symbol, so spades, hearts, etc. In your bags, you guys are different, I'll explain that in a second. In your bags, you've got your very special one. In your bags, you have wooden pieces. For those of you on these two tables, could you take your wooden pieces out and select the colour that aligns to your card? And you should have 10 pieces each. So one of those guys are doing that. What's going on here? You'll be using the colour to represent a group.
Die wij alles gaan worden.
In a minute. Okay. So you don't represent it, so they represent the personal group. You'll have discussion represent the group. Now, this is only designed to work with four, so if you could be an official observer. Me. Okay, and it's the only person you can learn as an observer, and that's really the main point is so you can interact. I always recommend an observer if we have enough people to representing a midpoint of view. Because the observer is very important. You will see things in this group. The group will not see. So there's a challenge for you. So you've got the biggest puzzle now. I'll come back in a second. Have you managed to get the colours in the right place? That's the first. Oh, we're playing already. How high can you go? Very good. We get a coconut. Okay. So the next thing to do, you all have a little question bank cards. They've got a little circle on them. You can find them? That's it, those?
That's the questions.
These question banks?
From 1 to 9.
Yeah. And you guys, notice there is a number on the back. Could you put the numbers, the cards in the right place around the table? Okay? And have them face down. Actually, There's a bingo.
It's a secret.
Have you been asked to be the official observer? Could you please be the official observer?
No, I don't want to.
You don't?
No, please let me play.
Well, you're going to have to negotiate. So as long as you negotiate nicely, that's okay. Not with me, by the way. With your fellows.
Responsible for the emotions.
Okay.
You asked me if they do it right.
Now, you guys have a dice. You guys have this. By the way, back to culture. In some cultures, a dice, so this nice little thing, also represents gambling. Oops. Same problem. So you don't have dice. You do. So for the observant ones, it's got 10 sides. Here we have randomizer cards. Strangely, there are 10 cards with the numbers 0 to 9. Okay, so the first step is to take, oh, it's really interesting, gold's one in the middle. Gold's one in the middle. You don't have them, okay. You'll learn what gold is for later on. Now, if you guys can throw a dice, just throw, yeah.
Yeah.
Just throw. You have a number?
Yes.
If you could pick up the card, please. And you guys do the same?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you guys could pick up, first one, we're going to go around in circles, but someone pick up the first randomizer card. And your number is? 0. So if you take the card 0, please. 9. 9? No, did you say? Okay.
Can everybody read the card?
So the ground rules are, and bearing in mind, I know we're running with different languages here, so we need to be respectful of that. If we're working in our mother tongue, so you guys over here should be easily sorted. The idea is the person who threw the dice or turned the card over reads the card out to the group. And what we do is we'll read the card. I'll tell you what we do in between in a second. We'll then, it's a tease, isn't it? We'll then move on to the next card and the next card, but we go round clockwise around the. I can't do that. It's interesting. Anyway, so we'll go around clockwise around, and the purpose is everyone has a voice. So that is the principal objective here. You have no idea which card you're going to get, so that just adds a little bit of fun. So whoever threw the dice here, if you could take the green card, and it's going to get a little bit noisy in a minute because you guys are going to be talking. And if you can now read that card out to your group, but before we do, and the same here, and you guys will do the same. Once you've read the card out, you need to think about a particular group. So let me give you some context. This is looking at the environment around a group. So this is specialising in group dynamics, what's happening inside a group and around. Dieter mentioned there are 3 areas that we look at. Within the group, we look at the learning and control dynamic, which that is not. But we also look at what's going on around the group, which is the environment dynamic, which is this. This works really effectively if you're within a company and you all know each other. My guess is you don't know each other very well. That was a good guess. It's the intelligence from the Brits. Now, so what I would like you to do is, Dieter and I were over a beer last night. We're having what would be a nice subject area which has no real energy behind it. So we thought Austrian education system. So you probably have an opinion, Susie, sorry you may not, but you can think of the Czech one if you wish.
I don't understand more anyway.
I think that's a challenge, huh? So, if you think of the Austrian education system, hold whatever your view is of that system, and think of the environment it is in, and when you listen to the question or statement that's being read out, you say, so I'm thinking of that group, big group. I read the statement. Now the question is, on a score of 1 to 10, how strongly do you agree with the statement?
And 10 is the highest one.
10 is the highest. Okay? You okay with the concept? I've given you a lot of information, I know, and I can repeat again.
Where do we find the statement?
On the card.
And the card.
So the card was turned over?
1 to 9.
So who did the card here? So if you can pick that up. And so if you can now all just read that card to your respective tables. We're not going to, at the end we'll bring the group all back together, but for the moment we're going to jump off into our 4 separate spaces.
Let us wait for the first card.
And then we'll regroup, yeah. Go.
So wie ich das verstanden habe,
also pass it over.
Das müssen wir als Gruppe entscheiden. Okay.
Als Gruppe Abstimmungsprozess, wie sehe ich das jetzt? Dann halt auf dieses Skala auch wirklich
Zijn gelijk bij 10.
Oh, it's a joke. So, not the bigger environment, the environment around the application. So, the medical system, the schools, so everything's going around. So how strongly do you agree with the statement? And if you, so now, this is the first let's assume you thought you agree with that statement. Put your score down there. You all do the same. And then you turn over to reveal a bit. So you have to make it consistent. But it sounds like 10 is your so it's trying to Now, what you do is you put your number down. Okay. And then when you put the numbers, you see. So now you put on here.
Average 4. Because 5 and 4, so it would be 4.
Are we thinking in a very rational way?
Yeah, but maybe we are already small because we already had this discussion.
No, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just asking a question.
We already had the discussion.
There is no right or wrong. There just is one. So if you put the code where the point is and you think represents the group. Okay.
No.
So you've done your structure. Yes. Now this is where you guys are playing. Now you put your on the scale. And then you take your Have you all been calibrated? Now you take your because it's what you want to sit down.
Es wird geredet, aber auch zugehört.
These guys, I think, are okay. So, you see,
Den anderen Standpunkt verstehen und versuchen, sich in den anderen rein zu versetzen. Und dann
Genau, deswegen habe ich auch das. Jeder Partei
Higher the number means
More, you're growing.
weil
das heißt,
Desto mehr möglich sein.
ihr kommt dazu. Wenn du Zwarer nimmst, steht weniger.
Das war jetzt einmal ein Ja, oder ein Zehner, das ist, da stehen wir wirklich dahinter. Ja? Im Prinzip alles durchspielen. Ja? Alles Und das Festhalten ist dafür, dass wir am Ende der einzelnen Ziele
Noch jeder Runde.
mit jeder Kartenaufdeckung.
Aber was ist das Ziel der Diskussion? Einvernehmen.
Und dass sie ähnlicher werden. Das heißt, dass sie mehr ähnlich werden. Das heißt nicht, dass sie das gleiche Ziel gehabt, aber dass sie ähnlich werden.
Auf einen Wert. Operationalisieren schon am Ende ein gemeinsames
das war sehr problematisch. Du bist auch Dreier gewesen.
Also ein Mann, der zu seiner Meinung steht, wird 10.
Also wer steht andere Meinung?
C'est dans the process. Okay, so I'm going to check the assumption. Let us talk
Here, feedback is provided that it is infrastructure and the
Was die Übersetzung? Group members.
Wir verstehen die deutschen
die deutsche Übersetzung.
Monitoring and support is integrated at all times for all group members.
Wir können uns auch darauf einigen, dass es so verstanden haben und so weiter.
Number 7. So, shall we try in English to make the point? Also, people in the UK, some struggle with this. So, monitoring, support, monitoring all time, especially now you're thinking of the Austrian education system. Monitoring
Okay, the monitor on a regular basis, stakeholders of the progress.
You edit the regular. You edit the regular.
Okay, or if not regular.
So monitoring and
Monitoring in the sense that it comes before evaluation.
Good question.
so there is no right and wrong here. It's about if you think about the education system and try to throw away some of the structures you have. Say, do you feel not do you feel monitoring and support taking place around it? And if you think it's strong, it's a 10. If you think it's not strong, it's a 1 or the 8.
Das hat jetzt alle Grundwissen eigentlich. Das hat alle Grundwissen zu den
Holding back. Now, what we can do is we can bring to the table preconceived instructions. This is how I think it. When you stay in a preconceived structure, you sometimes miss some other knowledge you already have. It's part of trying to help blind spots. Because if you say, what does it feel like? What's a number that feels right? That may or may not work for you yet. But if you try it, you'll start to see, generally start to see things. Now, not this is a competition. You haven't got the
Also ich kann mit eurer Geschichte das ist mein
So, what's the number?
So, Meisterschaft. Bereiche Rückmeldung.
Yeah, these discussions use a lot of different contexts.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. Now you turn over.
Oh, come on.
Now, isn't that interesting? So now you use the code. You put the code on the scale, perfect. Now, you have 10 minutes left. Maybe you can't understand quite so much. Maybe you understand. Now you go back.
About the German meaning, the German meaning, what seems to mean in German it means it's more like I'm honest, like honest feedback, yeah.
The language nuances is interesting. Anyway, that's the English version.
Was ich immer sehe in allen Kommunikationsformen ist extrem unterschiedliche Zuordnung.
Ganz aufmerksam zu. Anerkennen,
Genau, beteiligt. Fingerpoint.
So, just to give everyone a heads up, hold on a second. We have 10 minutes to go.
Also ich bin auch erst
All 10.
Also ich sehe auch sehr wenig Sachen. Wir werden ja genau, was nicht bewerten, finde ich. Das war auch sehr, sehr interessant.
1 hour?
We have 1 hour left.
Aha.
Okay.
Then we self-destruct.
Okay.
Oh, so you do 20 then?
Ich wollte eigentlich vor 10 Minuten einstellen, weil ich gerade eine Timebox gehabt habe. Jetzt haben wir mit 10 Minuten die Laufzeit. Genau so, wie es gestellt habe. Ja.
10 minute round.
Aber
Also vor den Obsatz.
Genau.
Ja, ich habe meine Perspektive. Man ist jetzt eher 16 beteiligte Personen.
Sie hören schon zu, als hätten Sie ja keine Gegenargumente. Ja gut, man kann ja Sachen verstehen.
So, no more discussing, only scoring. Okay. Now, notice, by the way, some of you like discussing, you can sit there. So, this is the reality of what happens in any group. You'll live it, what happens. So, because we have a time normally what happens in the world of business. So, what we now do is change the order. All you can do is walk into a neutral. So the person can read that and you move the code toward roughly right. And if you have one person scoring here, one here,
The interesting part is missing.
because the discussion. Now, didn't that work? The discussion does come up.
Wow.
Let's fast move in.
so einen Widerstand gegenüber Änderungen der Organisationen entdecken. Sind Sie das als Möglichkeit zu lernen, zu behandeln? Also wenn wir also eine vollmächtige Widerstand aller Änderung.
Widerstand aller, die sind die
Nicht vermuten, so interpretiere ich. Das habe ich unterstellen.
People actively look for conflict of interest without judgment, or blame and negotiate any changes.
Das heißt, ist ein Konflikt für die eher eine Chance oder ist das für die eher ein Punkt, damit du bleiben darfst und so eine Geschichte? Ja, man.
Oh, okay.
Oder siehst du das eher so?
Entwickeln Sie ein Gruppengefühl.
How low can you go?
Okay.
Okay. Sagst du nach?
Wie oft
Also es geht darum, also wenn es Veränderungen gibt, dass sie offen für Veränderungen sind, ohne dass sie eben das Ziel, das sie lang ständig einen Widerstand haben dagegen und so weiter. Konstruktiv und Chancen sehen. Okay, ich lasse mich versuchen. Warum 2 Jahre auch? Du hast mich noch nicht zurück.
Es gibt Bewegung, das ist auch keine gerichtete Bewegung.
Der Schmerz ist da, aber das Lieb ist da.
Masse hat dann 2.
Remember, it's the Austrian education system.
Drei von
Autonomie. Where you go. So if it was communication, if you think communication is so important, you would put both ways there. If you think
steht das in der englischen Links?
Choices are
So if it was autonomy, first and second vote card, you would like to see and have an impact on. Okay. Thank you.
Oft hast du diese Wahlmöglichkeiten.
Gibt es da Fragezeichen? Das Systemsierung, das
Schluck die Krone oder schluck
Motivation wurde
aber wenn du eine Meinung hast, keine Meinung.
Dass du schaust, in welche Richtung.
Ah, okay.
Es ist jetzt so weit, die amerikanische Gruppe Achtsamkeit.
Innerhalb der Organisation.
Der Lehrer. Das ist nicht der Schüler.
Das ist so für mich.
Und Autonomie.
Die werden wie in Nordkorea
aber nicht das Herr und nicht das Schüler.
Entscheidet sich, dass der Lehrer nicht überlegen, was man ja, aber das ist doch abhängig. Das ist jetzt eine Organisation, das sieht des Lehrers, des Schülers oder keine Ahnung.
Schüler, da haben wir ein bisschen noch.
Da ist jetzt beobachtet werden. Meisterschaft, Entwicklung, Talent wird entwickelt und Wissen geteilt und Kompetenzen zu erweitern. Das versucht
Konkurrierende Verpflichtungen.
Ja, wir haben vieles an Potenzial.
Man kann Potenzial.
Assimilationsberatung existiert zusammen. Entschuldigung, das verstehe ich nicht mal beim Schreiben.
Entscheidet euch.
Genau. Ein Roadmap.
Entscheidet euch. Zeit ist vorbei. Time is gone. Der letzten dürft ihr setzen, dann ist es aus.
Muss man noch erst
Okay, you guys happy with that? The last part. There's only one part.
Wir müssen uns vereinfachen.
Ich bin sehr dafür, ich bin für Durchschnittsbildung bei so Entscheidungsfindungsprozessen hier vorher. Aber wenn ich so ein Gruppenergebnis dann habe, ich nicht und ich bin Organisationsberater,
dann nehmt sich mit dem Profil. Sucht euch jeder eure 3 Karten auf. Dann schaut das bitte. Ihr seid schon ausgerechnet. Ja, mit dann nehmt sich bitte raus. Das heißt, die Kreuz, bitte die Kreuz Jeder sollte 3 Karten haben, die zu seinem Blatt passen.
Und der Schnellste kriegt die Joker.
Den Joker lasst bitte nicht. König und Dame müssen uns jeweils zugewiesen werden. Hier, um was geht es hier? Wir haben viele Diskussionen. Die Dame ist jede Bewertung auf beide Karten.
Aber das ist dann individuell. Ja, individuell. Ja. Das Modell kenne ich, ja. Distanzlehre.
What we have is ability. So we finish up.
So, no, we finished the whole workshop. Okay. And you don't want to sign up. 50 minutes, I will provide you this information.
That's cool. Progress.
Die zweite diese neuen Karten, die aufgelegt habt, ja? C. Die zweite die Dame.
Very good. Now, what I'm going to do is just check where you've got some development, which is number
Ich wollte nicht, ich fand das so gut. Okay. Man könnte Bottom-up starten.
Ja,
genau, das ist Priorität 1, das ist sozusagen 2 und das ist Keyflecken.
Very interesting game because you're getting out, they can be out of the mark. And most of those other trainers are inside.
Oh, that is where you need external help. Outside of the system.
König ist das der erste, ja, wo ich den ersten Schuss hinsetzen würde. Macht aber König und Dame. Wo bekommt der Group?
From outside. Yeah, from outside. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, based on the outside.
König.
There's something, there's some different. But still, I could imagine that there will still be some conflict.
Yeah, some
Gets to the point where
I don't know what you're saying.
Sorry. Habt euch irgendjemand erklärt, was der Punkt
Yeah, that's cool. So you the last one, the Joker. And the English joke is, there's always a joke in that. But I can't do that in the poker version. With the Joker, what is the one thing you as a group think
We didn't have time to like.
so you don't have we ever worked that one out before? This is called really important.
Dann kippt man nach außen und dann
What's the one thing you would like to see in the education? And only one thing you'd like to
Why do you think this is an partial thing? We
an
don't
item that you would like them to
And
work on to
we
see
might have more
change.
conversations, so it can take us much longer. Okay, but it's you talking. If there are some people who are not.
And that one you have to decide as a group.
Is that?
Wait.
Decision for the change.
Okay. I have a feeling you guys need to
There's always one person who asks the questions, but it would be a scrum master or a manager or
You're
just
Also wenn wir whatever it is, dass man das
Diskussionsrunden.
That wasn't influenced.
Ich habe gestern erklärt, dass das wird schon.
So,
Finish.
these guys already worked that out. So, what is it doing? She's like,
Genau. Du was.
have we shared, has any bearing on the game?
Jetzt
Wo sollte die richtige Einstellung
die verschiedenen Perspektiven so weit ist in dieser Zeit.
National war das Wichtigste.
Weil dann, genau, wenn die Kultur dann so aufgeht, dann müsste die
Was ist das Wichtigste, das Größte zuerst? Was geht da?
Wenn einer von denen auswächst und das Cash-Problem.
Aber genau so.
These guys don't have gold. Sorry, how are you guys doing? Perfect. Have you worked out what this is? Did we introduce it using the
Okay, we didn't distract by this.
And they were trying to work out the meaning of
We just waited to get the explanation.
that language. We waited until.
Okay, that you want to ask.
Danke. So annimmst, dann ist deines.
Jetzt können wir so
Also in meinem Bild, mein subjektives Bild, es funktioniert nicht schlecht in einem System, vorher Dinge zusammensetzen, zusammenarbeiten, dann wird alles gut werden. Und ich behaupte, dass es dort gut wird. Ihr sollt in den Klassen, in den Schulen, in den Ministerien,
Wie erfahren ist irgendwie erklärt, was
you could make that interpretation that I'm not meaning that. So you're using a reference. So for you it was about definition. For you it's about trying to work a formal definition to remind us. Any other So where you have a group that is having a long discussion, to say, I think it's anyone has the right to Of course it is. It's the centre, isn't it? Okay. Hello, can I draw the room?
Get some words.
Thank you. So I hope you've had some interesting discussions. I apologise for giving you the little distractions on the table, but the reason for the distractions is that happens in work as well. There's always distractions, and we always get pulled off by something, or I need to know the rules about something. What are the rules to engage? And the weird thing is, we sometimes don't realise we're waiting on the rules, because we become conditioned to wait for the rules. So the challenge here is not necessarily to be maverick and rebellious, although it is fun. It can get you fired as well, which is another interesting issue. But it's to say, is your response because of the rules? And are those rules still up to date and helpful? And if you're working in an increasing complex world, so back to Zuzi's presentation, if you able to join, rules are really an interesting phenomena in a complex world, because rules assume we know what's going to happen. Now, who knows Yo Sushi? Do you know you? No one, okay. Japanese food, yes? Yes. So, Yo Sushi is a UK company called Yo Sushi, and they have a conveyor belt.
Oh, that one.
Yeah? And this food just moves around. They put a timestamp on it, and this food can stay up for a certain period. It's a wonderful example. So the Yo Sushi conveyor belt is a complicated system. It winds around the restaurant. It looks quite interesting. But what's interesting is pay attention to how food is taken off and added. That is not a complicated system, that is a complex system, because you don't know which person's going to take the food off. And when the chef is going to put the food back on, how do they choose where to put it? Well, they have to find a space. But the space has been created randomly. So what they do is they get 10 dishes, and they walk around it, oh, there's a space, there's a space. They randomly put them out. So if you go to a Japanese restaurant where you see this conveyor belt of food, it's really interesting to look where the rules are taking place. So the food going around the conveyor belt, that's a strong rule. You can't go off the rail. It gets messy if you go off the rails, it falls over. But how it gets replenished, there's a guidance system, but the chef doesn't know what food's going to be eaten. So they have to dynamically pay attention to the complexity of what's happening in the restaurant to decide what next thing to make. Otherwise they'll be making food that gets thrown away. So if you want to explore a very contained version of complexity and complicated in the same space, go to one of those Japanese restaurants and just pay attention to what's happening. Now, back to this subject. Can I ask where we put our cards? We have two that went against development. This is the one voting card. You guys, where did you put your joker?
Development, to take one culture, one was culture.
So we've got culture, which is number?
Collaboration.
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 Culture 9?
9. Culture is 9.
No, it's not.
Collaboration is one.
No.
Collaboration is one.
Calibration.
One.
And where is calibration the number?
There.
One.
One.
Oh, 1. If you said I, I'd be okay.
It is the game that you invented, right?
But see, when you get to my age, you forget things. It's okay. So, it is.
Doesn't pass the filter.
No. So anyway, so we said that's collaboration.
Yeah.
Collaboration, culture. We had 2 in development? Is that, yes, he's 2.
Yeah.
Okay. This is where now I go and get a cup of tea and I say, discuss. No, seriously. What was behind development? Yes, right. What's behind development? Just a high level, as a group.
We have in our hand.
Someone's going to talk. Sorry.
Basically, development in this context means that this, or we believe that this is the most important thing, that this is our main cause why there is a school.
A challenge.
Challenge. Why we have schools is to teach people to develop the skills. So this is our main objective.
So that is to develop the people in the system, not just the students, but actually the faculty, the lecturers, the teachers.
Use kind of our core competency for ourselves.
Right. Okay. So this is development of the organisation primarily, to enable it to develop others. And what about you guys? Do you have a similar meaning or different meaning?
It's basically the same.
Okay.
Yeah, it's true.
Really? Not a slight subtle difference.
Exactly about that before.
So what were we discussing before that? The gold, yes. So we know the money can be distracting, that's fine. But before the gold.
Before the goal. I think we were still playing before the goal.
I think we decided rather on numbers in this point because we had 2 words where there was the most cards.
Yeah.
We had change and development, and we on the change corner we had 4 cards of, in my view, we need help here from the externally. And at the development department, we had more cards that said, this is my first or second choice.
That's where the drive was,
Yeah, and we thought like, okay, on development, maybe we can change something from ourselves or from inside. So we don't need the help from externally.
Right. And it's really interesting that what you think needs to happen at a group level and where you think you may need help sometimes align, sometimes do not, and it doesn't actually matter. Each group and each perception will be different. We'll finish with these 2 tables here, and then I'll give you a summing up of what we've been doing a little bit more. So who wants to go? Left or right?
I think it's easier if we continue because we had more or less the same situation. We had focus on 2 topics, the change and the collaboration, and it was the same. We had we have some dependencies on external, as we need some external support for the change. So we agreed on saying, okay, if these are the main topics for us, let's start with the one that we can really do on our own now.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So that was the collaboration one, yeah? For you?
Yep.
Culture.
Yeah, on our side, we think that the culture in the educational system is the one point which is an obstacle to all others around.
And so what does that mean?
It means that there is a lack of discussion culture, a lack of understanding culture, a lack of conflict culture.
A lack of conflict or too much conflict?
So,
does that mean
the stakeholders are fighting with each other, but everybody on his own, and there is no
digging deeper in position.
Yeah. I just state my position, and then whatever you talk to me.
So there's at one level, it sounds like there's no meaningful dialogue.
Yeah.
Not a discussion which would allow it to move forward, maybe.
Yeah, and this spans on all other topics in our opinion. So it's the same situation with communication as it is with development in the system.
Okay. Now, what's interesting is we've got 25 minutes, or just 20 minutes left actually. Any questions people have at the moment? I'm going to move to another step, but any questions at this level? Like, what the hell are we doing here? Oh, no, sorry, I was thinking that loud. No, it's okay.
I have a question. Reading the description of this lesson here, it said this has been done on 4,000 managers.
No, that's incorrect then. I've done it with 500 people, not 4,000 managers.
Okay. I think it says in the description of the...
Well, we should have a look together then. So I'll share with you the facts, because I've done most of them. I've worked with, the largest group I've worked with, which is not via the pieces, but it was the same model, was 180 people in the Auckland University of Auckland University of Technology. And that was in February this year. So we had 180 people, and we had a sheet version, and we basically had another poster. So the model's being used there in the largest group. In terms of this type of size of group, I've worked with 5 or 6 groups of this type of size, and then other open sessions where there may be 60 people in the room, and we're using a paper version. Prior to that, about 3 years ago, we researched through 9 companies, no, it's 9 companies, 9 companies and 174 people. And that was sponsored by the Association of Project Managers.
And how long did it take place, those sessions? How long did it?
So the original research took us actually 8 months to do. Once we got the research and created the game, when you are familiar with the statements, you can do one round of one particular dynamic, so this is the environment dynamic, you can do that in 20 minutes. It's because you're learning, you don't know each other. So now imagine, this leads beautifully into the agenda item I've hidden, called the open and closed group response. Obviously this is an open group, so you have to choose a subject that you can maybe relate to, albeit a little bit loosely. But if you're now inside a company, and let's imagine it was a Scrum team, and you're worrying about whatever the deliverables are for that particular function, the purpose of that particular team, now you can actually have the Scrum team together and ask these questions, and the person who might facilitate could actually be the Scrum Master or Agile Coach. Because do people feel, now imagine all those statements, but in the environment around Scrum. Because you will all have experienced the environment you're in will influence what happens within a group. It's not the only cause, but it influences. Now we're not going to have time to look at what's called the learning dynamic and control dynamic, but the learning dynamic is looking at 10 statements, so it's a bank of 10 orange cards, and they're now looking at aspects being, how do you as a person, so imagine you've got this group, so it'd be how would you perceive this group? So that's the frame you have. So imagine that could now be your Scrum team. So how do I perceive the group? So you're not measuring yourself, you're not measuring other people. Most psychometrics and assessment systems, 360s, it's my judgment of myself through a numbering system, my judgment of someone else. This is, who's measuring the system? Right? It kills me. Who's measuring the system? We're all influenced by the system we're part of. Who's paying attention to it? You are, you work. But who's really paying attention? So this is about trying to measure the system that you're part of. And there's 2 components to the system. The relationship space within the group and what's immediately around the group. Now I mentioned there's a learning dynamic, there's also a control dynamic. Now, here's the interesting thing. For an open group, we always use the environment dynamic because it's relatively friendly.
What do you mean by environment dynamic?
So this is looking at what's around, we said around Austrian education system. So if your point of focus was a group, a scrum team, what do you as a group see what's happening around you? So we refer to that as the environment dynamic, but it's the immediate environment. The learning are behaviours and attitudes which allow you to exchange information easily. So you're looking at the relationship space. The control dynamic is, guess what? The bit that inhibits the learning. I actually know the right answer. I don't care what you guys are thinking, because I'm right. I might choose to listen to you, but actually I'm going to do this anyway. Have you ever experienced someone doing that to you? They know the answer, and they're going to do whatever they're going to do. But please tell me what you think, because I really care. Right now, this is what I'm going to do. So the control dynamic explores the darker side of humans. Guess what? We're humans. Strange thing, that. Inquiry systems in humans. This is a slight distraction, but it's worth sharing. This is just a model, so it's incomplete and we're more complex than this, but this is a helpful step forward for where most of us are currently, well, where most of us are being educated actually. If you imagine we have 3 inquiry systems in each of us. We have our cognitive inquiry system. I think that was running quite heavily today. What does the score mean? What might I do with the gold? All that good stuff. Actually, that's emotional as well. But you've got the cognitive going on. I'm sorry, we're taking photographs. It's tweeted out and everything. So we have. So I'm now playing with your emotional piece. So you have the cognitive piece. How do we inquire in the world through cognition, our thinking? You have our social. Now, guess what happens in groups? A significant contribution is about the social interaction. You guys have all been interacting. Took you a little bit of time, one table to get a bit warmed up, but you started going. You all started going. The third is the emotional inquiry system. So how we emotionally connect with what's going on, socially connect with what's going on, and cognitively. Thinking of the education system, so DJ, thank you for choosing that one. Might we focus primarily on the cognitive system as we develop? No. Really? You went to an interesting school. Really?
I'm the emotional guy, and
So, did you ever feel alone?
In my life at some point, of course.
In the education system?
Yeah. Not sure, yes, maybe.
It would be very unusual for someone to say, no, actually I felt that both socially, emotionally and cognitively I had balance in my education life. Oh, balance, bad word. So, and now what's happened is people are more in tune to their different spaces. But if you go to the wonderful world of PhD, depending on what it is you're studying, there's still a propensity to focus on the cognitive. What makes high-performing teams is rarely anything to do with cognitive. Go figure. So we focus on the very thing that's not actually going to make an impact. It's a brilliant strategy, really, isn't it? So the purpose of it, now, what do you think the purpose of the scoring has been here? Are you calibrated people? As you came through that door, did you suddenly all have a calibrated system? You all knew what 1 to 10 meant?
In this network, probably yes. We share similar informations.
So is your one the same as someone else's one?
No.
Opinions?
How do you know? I mean, how do you know that my one means the same as your one? We didn't calibrate it beforehand, so.
This is the feeling that's coming out. Good on you. The interesting thing is we tend to think that we have a similar way of viewing the world. Ironically, it's very rare that we do. Spot the next assumption that traps us. So we have this belief that we've gone through the same education system, we've created whatever qualifications we've got, we have a common understanding, it's going to be easy, isn't it? And so is it easy? And then we say no. So then you say, okay, if it's not easy, might we have missed something? That's the question to leave it. Might we have missed something? And then, so by the way, I am original training electronics engineer. So I really live and breathe the world of rationality. Until I discovered that messy thing called people. Most inconvenient. It's like, oh, my rules don't work anymore. How come? But I had worked in an engineering company, and the worst thing of an engineering company is engineers get each other, which is really weird. So we just think everyone else is nuts. It's really interesting. If you have working with a bunch of engineers all together, you can fool yourself into you understand what's going on. What's happening, you've got this microcosm of this group that understands what's going on for them. And every time you interact with these annoying things called customers, I mean, if only they would think rationally, it'd be much easier. And then so what made me aware of this was actually going through many mergers and acquisitions. How much time? 15 minutes.
50 minutes.
Okay. Yep. After many mergers and acquisitions, I'd seen how high-performing teams imploded. They collapsed. It took about 2 years. So if you've got a really strong team, and you have a merger and acquisition taking place, and the environment is not supporting that, the high-performing team can become the reason why the organisation starts to fail, and that's a paradox. Because the high-performing team is doing what it knows is right to do, because it's rationally worked it all out. Unfortunately, the context has changed. And what now is the helpful thing to do may not be what the high-performing team can see. So the reason the environment dynamic is at play is to say, know that what's happening around us influences what we see and what we do, as well as the relationships within a group. And then you've got, if you like, the more generous side. So who has heard in the world of Agile that command and control is not helpful? Anyone? We've got a lot of activity here, I can see. So a lot of people think command and control is good, honestly. So what about hierarchy? Is hierarchy a good or a bad thing in the world of Agile? Any thoughts? Bad. Hands up for bad.
Hierarchy is never bad.
We'll come back to you in a minute. So, hands up for bad. So 50-ish, 50%. Hands up for good. Hands up for don't know, or it depends.
It depends.
So, I've seen in some of the Agile writings how self-organising teams, and it becomes anti-hierarchical often, is how it gets ultimately interpreted. Cool.
A self-organizing team doesn't mean that you don't have a hierarchy.
I totally agree, because I'm going to give you an example of an organisation that is incredibly hierarchical and really good at self-organising. It's called Toyota and 3M. They have hierarchy. Japanese culture is so hierarchical, it's unbelievable, but they're highly adaptive. If you want to look at a different angle on this space, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, Sloan Management School, have got some really good articles in the past sort of 6 months around not self-organising, but dynamic design of organisations. And they're celebrating, actually, guess what? Having something where you can focus on operational excellence while also having, so it's not A or B. We often think of, well, if I'm going to be Agile, I can't do this. But that's certainly in the UK. I know we're behind the times, but that's what's happening. It's like, Agile can't have hierarchy. And I'm thinking, rubbish. You can. Agile or continuous improvement is the other thing that we hear a lot of. If you're doing continuous improvement, you can't do Agile, or vice versa. People like Toyota and 3M do both. And I would suggest the only way we're going to survive is we have to pay attention to using the right one at the right time in the right context. And if we don't pay attention to context dynamically, we're in trouble. Because we'll be busy doing this, and the environment, the bigger environment will shift on us, and we'll be out of date again. That's my personal view. I don't know if people think it's nuts.
I have a little question for understanding.
Yep.
Because you described before that the intention is to focus like on the environment.
Around the Austrian education.
Wouldn't this lead to a thing that, let's say, when we as a group are playing this game and we are a team, that we are just focusing, everything outside is so bad and so much things are going on, we don't focus on ourselves, what we are doing wrong or what we should improve?
Can I start to Yes, you're right. And the first question I have of a group is, have they noticed that yet? Because you're quite right. And the reason we choose the can we focus externally, if you're still trapped in a blame frame, and most of us have come through some kind of blame experience, be it schooling, could be parenting, could be the workplace, there's a tendency to point the finger at other people. This is to seduce people to potentially do that as well. But the real insight comes from, I can't read German. I've picked up the German set. That was very clever. I'm just going to read out a couple of cards for you so that it's easier. So, the environment has a couple, so there's a, I mentioned we have the distractions, the little timers or the gold piece. But it's also allowed people to get to know each other. Because there's an issue of rapport. Until people have started to be able to talk with each other, you're not going to get to what's really going on in the room. So the safe place to talk about is everywhere else. Now, if the group already understands how to interact with each other and there's a good dynamic in play, you could skip this and go straight to what the learning dynamic is. So I'll just read out a couple of statements. So you've got 10 cards. Oh, well done, thank you. And so this is a learning dynamic one. There is a clear and common understanding how the group's purpose supports the organisation's purpose. So if you think of the group that you work in, not this group now, the group work, on a score of 1 to 10, you would come up with a number. You can share if you wish, but you don't have to. And so, and this is really saying, is our group's purpose clear? And do we align to the organisation? The biggest challenge in a merger and acquisition is the group's purpose might be clear, but no longer aligned. And I've lived that world. I was the terrorist team, which was brilliant, by the way, what it did. Unfortunately, we were trying to do something that the organisation didn't need. It did need it for 5 years beforehand, but not after the M&A. So good can become bad very easily in terms of helping. Another one, over time, I have seen the quality of working life improve. On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you score? What would you think of your own group? You don't have to voice it, just think about it. I don't use work-life balance. Work-life balance has a cultural bias to it. But work-life quality, well, it's not calibrated again. But so do I think my quality of life has gone up or gone down? I can make a relative assessment for me. Now, my 10 might be different to your 10. Actually doesn't matter. Because have you ever come across meaningless metrics? Metrics that have no value whatsoever, but we're very good at measuring them.
Is it mathematics in school or something?
It's an issue of application. The maths at school is okay, it's when it's applied in a certain way it becomes problematic. Without maths you wouldn't have all sorts of toys, you know, like gadgets and phones and things.
So, I've seen it as a part of a merger.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the merger, when someone creates an action items based on those values.
And these are important. And you say, really? In the UK, the healthcare system is full of meaningless metrics. There's an issue of when an ambulance arrives, unless you are within 4 hours checked and admitted to hospital or sent away with some medication, that counts as a failure for the emergency system. So do you know what they do? It's got better against it recently. You'd have a queue of ambulances with people in them because the clock starts when they go over the threshold of the hospital. So if you keep them in the ambulance, it's okay. Now, might that meaningless metric be driving behaviours? Well, I think so. Do these people come to work wanting to exploit people's health? No. You become you care about people. So the measurement becomes a distortion on the system. So why have I asked you to score 1 to 10? 1 level has no meaning. Oh, that's wicked. So when we're saying what's the average, I say, what is it? Is it the average? Is that important? So use measurement carefully. There was a guy called Edward Deming, some of you will know of, some won't. Deming was involved in helping Toyota many years ago. He's passed away quite a few years now. And he had a thing called the system of profound knowledge, and he said, understand variation. If you don't understand variation, don't make decisions on statistics, because you'll be making ill-informed decisions. That's what happens in UK health service. You've got ministers making decisions on stuff they haven't got a clue what they're doing. I'm glad you're recording this. The other thing is understand systems thinking. So it's understand variation and stats, and use statistics appropriately, but wisely and carefully. Understand systems, understand the theory of knowledge. That can get you into the world of philosophy, which can be quite an interesting one. Takes you back a few thousand years. And then you move into the psychology. So this engineer, Deming was an engineer, said, unless you pay attention to psychology, you're missing a key component in any sort of form. So we've taken that ethos and said, might this be helpful in the group space? Which is why we've applied it. So this is about pacing. We look outside, we flush out some of the questions, people are starting to get to know each other, they're starting to have a dialogue. This group loved dialogue right at the beginning.
Yeah.
It was a challenge to get them back on track, but well done, you did get back on track. And then you can start to go to the, because this is still quite nice, right? I'll read this one out. It is common that members of the group explore and design different approaches jointly rather than individually. This is all good collaborative stuff.
2 minutes left.
Yeah.
Question and answer, something like
well,
this.
1 second. Control dynamic, which I haven't got here, is the dark side of humanity. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to manipulate, I can do it very cleverly, so you won't know, but you'll sense something isn't right, which undermines trust. And if you've got trust that's not, if you can't speak out openly, you're not going to have high quality. And I will shut up now.
That's a question?
Q&A time.
No question. No, thank you.
I have a question.
Please.
Today we focused on the Austrian school system, yes?
Yeah.
But what's the question in organizations? Is it just the one question, or the reference point, is it just the organization, or can you do it regarding on departments, or
The answer is
just
you
break
can
it
frame
down
it.
into...
So, if you imagine you guys all work together,
Yeah.
then you would just do it one level out from where you are.
Oh, okay.
So the immediate surround that you're in.
Mhm.
Because the thing that's going to impact you more than anything else is what's happening to you immediately around your group. So if you're a productive group and you're surrounded by hostile groups, but actually you're in a company of 5,000 people, the 5,000 isn't important. What's important are the groups around you, because that's going to influence you most of all. The point of reference is you can apply this wherever you wish. So the language is a little bit ambiguous to allow you to apply to whatever level of abstraction you would like to. Okay?
One question. What's the right timing to do this? So especially at the beginning when a team just started a project, or more or less if there is an issue, or I don't know, in a regular base to see how things progress. What's your experience?
But I would go right at the beginning. Because it's a way of getting rapport. It's a way of getting done. It's not about what the answers are meaningless. The important bit is the dialogue. So this is really, do you know the term Trojan horse? So,
Trojanisches Pferd.
Ach so, danke.
Okay. So, that's all this is. Its sole purpose is actually to get you to have a discussion. Because the answer is not in the game. The answer is in the discussion. And the great thing is that means the game can never, it may be a bit confusing, but it can never be wrong, because the answer is always in the group. Sneaky.
So now I take the last 30 seconds.
My last 30 seconds?
Yeah, the last 30 seconds.
I'm around for 2 days, by the way, so feel free to grab me if you wish.
I hope you had fun. I hope you got some new impressions and you enjoyed it. Maybe you like it. If anyone wants more information, I take my business cards over there. And if anyone wants to discuss it with us, please feel free. I wish you a great conference, the first conference, afternoon, and the second day tomorrow.
So, and thank you for playing.